Friends, if you've been following On the Pen, you've probably heard me bring this up before. Last fall at Obesity Week, I had the chance to meet some of the team from Fractyl Health, and then we sat down with a subsequent interview with Dr. Harith Rajagopalan, the CEO of Fractyl Health. We talked about a pretty radical idea at the time. What if you could stop taking a GLP-1 and still keep the weight off? Back then, it felt like more of a theory, an idea, and today it's data. So Fractal just dropped last week some preliminary results from their Reveal 1 study, a first of its kind trial testing whether a one-time outpatient procedure called Revita could actually help people maintain their weight loss after stopping a GLP-1 therapy. Dr. Rajagopalan is here with me now, and we're going to talk about what this could mean for the future of obesity treatment. Let's welcome in Dr. Harith Rajagopalan. Harith, welcome back to On the Pen.
Thanks, Dave. Pleasure to be here.
Yes, it's an honor to have you here. We had such a great conversation last time you were here, and as I said, we had this idea, right? This idea that perhaps this Revita program, and I'll let you kind of explain once again real quickly what that is. This Revita program may help people have an off-ramp to GLP-1, something that as we know, the data shows is going to be very challenging, right? A very real problem that you are addressing at Fractyl Health. So tell us a little bit, Dr. Rajagopalan, about what the procedure is, how it works, and then we'll get into kind of some questions about the data that just came out.
Okay, so thanks, Dave. It's a pleasure to be on the podcast again. I think as you and your readers know, the gut is a key regulator of hunger and of blood sugar, and the science on that's become much more clear over the past several years. The region of the gut that seems to be a critical regulator of hunger is the first part of the small intestine. Is called the duodenum. And so what Revita is an outpatient endoscopic procedural therapy targeting the duodenum to reverse some of the changes that are caused by high fat and high sugar diets in the lining of the gut that we think are a root cause of obesity and type 2 diabetes. So we deliver through our catheter a ablative energy that removes the lining of the gut in a very precise manner and allows the body to regenerate a healthy new lining that can regulate your body weight and your blood sugar more effectively. And so we've been studying Revita in type 2 diabetes for many years and have advanced the development of the procedure and the therapy in patients with obesity and coexisting type 2 diabetes. We observed through hundreds of patients treated in that way that people who undergo Revita seem to be protected from weight gain for 2 years or more after a single 40-minute outpatient procedure. And so in the last 18 months, it's become pretty clear that GLP-1s have transformed the treatment landscape, not just for diabetes, but also for obesity. But there's a problem emerging, which is that a lot of people stop taking GLP-1 drugs for a variety of reasons, which we can get into, and then are at risk of regaining all of that weight that they worked so hard to lose by taking the drug in the first place. So the question is, how do you maintain that hard-won weight loss? How do you lock in that weight loss if you need to or want to stop taking the drug for whatever reason? And so we have data now for the first time on the first patients that we've been treating in this approach from the Reveal 1 study, and I'm happy to go into that.
Excellent. And I think the cool thing about this is not only is it just a simple, I say simple, but for on the patient side, a simple 40-minute outpatient procedure, but one that, as we learned in the data, and as you probably have gobs of it from previous studies in diabetics, pretty minimally painless, right? Or pretty painless, right?
Right. I mean, if you look at the studies of GLP-1s, I mean, the rates of nausea and vomiting are pretty substantial. And one of the things that makes it so hard to lose weight on GLP-1s is you've got to titrate them up really slowly to prevent yourself from developing nausea and vomiting. Because if you go too fast, then you're going to have a hard time tolerating the medicines. So you're in this catch-22 where you want to avoid nausea and vomiting, but that means it's going to take you a very long time to get to a target dose of the drug that's going to get you your body weight, which is why it's so hard and time-consuming to lose weight on these GLP-1 drugs. Revita is a one-time procedure, and we see very, very, very low rates of nausea or vomiting. Only a fraction of the patients that we treat experience symptoms at all, and almost all of the time, if they experience symptoms, they're mild and they last a couple of days, and then they're done. And the effects of Revita that we're seeing on blood sugar and body weight in clinical studies so far seem to really lock in benefit within the first 4 weeks. It doesn't take months and months to begin to see the benefit. The benefit is upfront. And so what we think that this is pretty interesting is if you've been on a GLP-1, you've gotten to a plateau of your body weight, you need to keep injecting in order to be able to keep your body weight off, and yet you're worried about muscle mass loss, or you're worried about the nausea and vomiting that you're continuing to feel for a day or two afterwards, or you're worried about your access to GLP-1s in the future, and you're dependent on these weekly injections in order to keep your weight where it is, not to lose any more because you've already plateaued. What do you do next? Could Revita be a straightforward outpatient procedure that resets your body's metabolism so that you now can live a more comfortable life at that lower weight without ongoing medicines? And early data from Reveal suggests that that may be possible. And that's super exciting, I think, for millions of people who are at risk of like being tethered to a medicine that's giving them a lot of benefit, but is also at risk of not being available for one reason or another.
Right. One reason or another is right. There are a lot of reasons that keep people from accessing these treatments. And of course, with the ending of the compounded versions of GLP-1s really on the horizon here, it really underscores that issue. And I think this is just amazing because, again, one of the reasons that I fell in love with what you're doing at Fractal Health is because you're doing it differently. You're doing it differently, and you're addressing a real problem with a really sort of groundbreaking approach here. Now, let's talk a little bit about Reveal and the data that dropped. And you can kind of correct me if I've got any of this wrong, but there were 15 people in this study who had already lost 15% of their body weight on a GLP-1. Then they stopped, had the procedure done, and most kept off the weight or gained back less than what you'd expect based upon what we've seen maybe in like the Surmount trial. And at the end of the 1 month mark, the average weight regain was about 1.2%, which is way lower than the 3% average from previous studies of people stopping GLP-1s. And for the two patients who've hit the 3 month mark, one still had very minimal regain and the other did gain just a bit more, but that's just a couple of people, right? So let's talk about what it is you think is driving this response so early in the Revita procedure.
Well, I think that people who have a challenge with obesity, the central problem is their brain is wired to try to keep them at that higher weight. So if you stop taking your GLP-1 drug, it's like a rubber band. Your weight's going to bounce right back up to wherever your brain thinks it belongs. And right now, all of the drugs and diets that we do are sort of pulling that rubber band down. But then when you stop the diet or you stop the drug, boom, the rubber band pulls you back up again. What Revita aims to do is to target the reason why that rubber band is held up here in the first place. So you take a GLP-1, you lose your weight, the rubber band comes down. What if you can now lower the top of that rubber band so your body doesn't drive you back to that higher weight?
So in other words, resetting your set point.
This is what we think a durable metabolic reset looks like. You reset that brain thermostat for what your weight should be, and you lower that thermostat so that now when you stop taking the drug, your brain's not trying to drive you to the hunger that gets you back to that higher weight. And we think that what we're trying to do is to make you a healthier human, to make your physiology work better and more normal again, rather than to give you a drug that you're dependent upon to manipulate the physiology while you're on the drug. the job to be done for a patient is to make them not a patient anymore.
There you go. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Not to become a patient anymore. And what a dream that is for anybody living with any chronic illness. I can definitely attest to that. What are you hoping to see as this progresses at like the midpoint to give you confidence at Fractal that this is going to hold up long term?
Yeah. So let's just say, so Reveal is an open label study of people who've already lost 15% body weight on either Ozempic, Wegovy, Zepbound, on any of those agents. And now they need to stop taking a GLP-1. So we're asking people, why are you stopping? Why do you need to stop GLP-1? Why are you enrolling in the study? In some instances, what we've heard from patients is that they feel like they've lost muscle mass and they've been on the drug, they've plateaued their body weight, but now they're still not feeling the energy that they wish they had. So they want a chance at maintaining a lower body weight, but to rebuild their muscle mass through diet and exercise and live a healthier life at this lower weight. Other patients are reporting that they just don't like the way that the injection makes them feel every week when they do it for 2 or 3 days. And then that it's getting tiresome. And others clearly are worried about accessing these medicines in the long run. You mentioned compounded drug formularies, which may no longer be available, but also insurance companies are asking, with so many people stopping these drugs, how long should we be paying for them? The UK said we'll pay for these drugs for like 1 or 2 years, and then after that, we're not going to pay for them anymore. Problem is, that doesn't really leave people with a strategy for what to do when they're not going to cover them anymore. Right. So there's clearly a gap here for something that you can offer people, an off-ramp from GLP-1s to persistent and sustained weight maintenance without massive ongoing effort. And that's what Revita aims to do. In addition to the Reveal open label study, we're concurrently running a pivotal trial, which is for registrational approval in the United States, called Remain-1. And Remain-1 is set up in a different way. We are taking people who are not yet on a GLP-1. We're giving them tirzepatide, which is the active agent in Zepbound. And then we are titrating them up to get to 15% body weight loss. And then we are stopping the tirzepatide and then randomizing them to either undergo our Revita procedure or a placebo or sham procedure with a gastroenterologist, and then following them to see what will happen with their weight. And as you mentioned, we have a key midpoint data analysis coming in later this year, in the third quarter, which will begin to show through the first 3 months whether people who undergo Revita are on a better weight maintenance trajectory than the people who undergo a sham, where we kind of already know from prior studies like Surmount, like you mentioned, that people are going to keep regaining their body weight over time. And so we feel like this could be the first potential pathway to sustainably living at a lower weight, which I think at the end of the day is what people who struggle with obesity are really hoping for. Do I have to keep working on my obesity for the rest of my life? Like alcoholism, is it something you got to deal with for the rest of your life? Or is it something that can be acutely treatable so that you can then move on and live a life at a lower body weight? That I think is really the aspiration, not just from a comfort and convenience standpoint, but it's also about your risk of all of the downstream cascading consequences of obesity, like type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. Because if you can keep people at that lower weight, then we believe that that will also imply that their risk of these other downstream conditions will be lower too. So it's not just about looking good, but it's also about feeling healthier and maintaining better health for a longer period of time.
Very interesting. And sorry, I should have set that up a little bit better, between the Reveal and the Remain study. So you basically have two studies kind of going on in parallel. One where you've got patients who already hit that 15% mark on an existing GLP-1 therapy. And then you've got the Remain study that you've got people going through the study on tirzepatide, getting them to 15, cutting off the injectable and giving them the procedure and then measuring from there. And you said data from the Remain study you're anticipating later on yet this year?
Yeah, exactly right.
Amazing. Amazing. So with Revita and with sort of what we're hoping to see long-term in these studies, how quickly do you think something like Revita could move towards FDA approval? And obviously assuming that all the data stays strong, and obviously there's a lot going on with the FDA these days, but all things being equal, how if all things are sort of normal, how long do you think that we're waiting until some sort of FDA action on this, regulatory action?
Right. So what we've stated is that we expect having the data that we need to begin our regulatory filings in the U.S. next year in 2026.
Amazing.
Okay. And so then that will be when the clock will start for the FDA to begin its review. And then we are in parallel to running these studies, preparing for what our potential commercialization or, more clinical availability of Revita will look like. So we've been fortunate to work with leading physicians across the country, from Washington to Miami and from New Hampshire to LA, literally. Like, we have centers across the country that are training and performing this procedure and delivering it through the clinical studies. And what that will enable us to do is to begin to offer this to patients across the country once the FDA gives their blessing.
Sure. And I may have asked you this in the last interview. I can't remember what your answer was, though. Do you have any sort of fast track? I don't know. I just think of it as a wild card that pharmaceutical companies can pull with the FDA, and they sort of get fast track authorization, which takes the approval process from maybe like a year or 16 months down to maybe 6 months or so. Is there anything like that, or are we looking at a full year or more before the FDA makes a determination?
Well, Revita does have breakthrough device designation, and I think that that's a major sort of milestone for the development of Revita for weight maintenance, because I think it speaks to how important of a problem this weight maintenance issue has become. Arguably, now that we have Zepbound and we have Wegovy, and you're able to achieve weight loss with these drugs, the unmet need in obesity is not about, like, can you get to weight loss, but how do you keep the weight off? And I think the reason that we got breakthrough device designation is because the clinical scientific community kind of understands, like, the biggest challenge in obesity today is not weight loss, but it's weight maintenance. And we have been pioneering therapeutic approaches for weight maintenance now. We are clearly the leaders in developing a strategy that could enable sustained weight maintenance. And we're excited about the FDA's granting of breakthrough device designation, because I think it does mean that they recognize the importance of the problem, and how that translates into approval timelines. Your guess is as good as mine.
Oh, we want it. We want it. I mean, the more options, the better, especially as the accessibility questions loom. I mean, if you're able to develop an off-ramp, I just think that's a game changer, not only for individual patients, but it's a game changer for the industry in general. The entire healthcare system, to be able to give payers an option to cover something that may give patients an opportunity to not be on a chronic drug to maintain proper weight. So with that as sort of the backdrop, my last question for you is, how realistic do you really think this is for the majority of people as a potential procedure to maintain that weight loss? And then maybe sort of a follow-up question, is it something that somebody's going to have to do every 2 years? I think you threw out that number earlier as sort of a benchmark that you guys had set before.
I think it's already a reality. I mean, Revita is available in Europe under a CE mark, and it's been reimbursed by the German government. And we've been treating people in Germany and been developing data in people with type 2 diabetes and seeing really impressive improvements in blood sugar and body weight in the people that we've been treating. So how realistic is it? I mean, it's already a reality in the world. now the question is making it a reality for people in the United States. And I think that we are incredibly confident in the data that we just shared. I think we're incredibly confident in our scientific leadership in this whole area, in the development of this therapeutic category for weight maintenance. And we're confident that the relationship and discussions we've had with the FDA could lead to a productive dialogue about approval once we have the full data package in hand next year. And so get ready would be my answer. I just wish that I could do it faster, but I can't make a 6-month primary endpoint come any earlier than 6 months, unfortunately. My biggest wish would be to accelerate this so that we could have something to offer patients sooner. But I would say that, there are 100 million people today with obesity in the United States, right? The clinical and the economic consequences of obesity and its downstream complications are so self-evident. And I think that people deserve a chance to live a life without chronic therapy to manage that disease. That's what I mean when I say that the highest ambition of a patient is to not have to be called a patient anymore, right? You don't wake up in the morning and say, I'm really looking forward to developing a long-term relationship with my doctor to manage this disease that's going to get worse over the rest of my life, right? You're hoping the doctor is going to say, okay, yeah, here's a problem and here's a potential solution that can help you. What we're seeing suggests that this could help a lot of people. And some people will be very happy taking injectables or orals to manage their weight for the rest of their lives. God bless. That's completely reasonable. But I think it's common sense that that's not going to work for everybody for a variety of different reasons. And there's a substantial number of people for whom it's really not a strategy that they're going to be excited about managing. And so we want to offer another path, as you mentioned at the top of the podcast, another totally different type of therapeutic option that we think is going to be highly attractive to a large number of people and can happily coexist in the obesity market with the drugs that are going to get better over time, but are not going to be perfect for everybody for the rest of their lives. That's where we come in.
Amazing. I know that you've got to run here. One last quick question on the gene therapy side. So I get really excited about that one. Just a quick flyover of where that is in process, because I believe there was did you just dose your first human patient?
No, we did not. But we are heading towards our first clinical trial application. And later in the second quarter of this year. So before mid-year, we're going to begin our regulatory filings for a first in human study. I mean, for your listeners who may not be familiar with that, let's just ask, what if you could do a one-time treatment that would allow your body to make more GLP-1 where you need it in the body, when you need it, and how much you need to manage your weight and your blood sugar in a physiologic way, like your body's own GLP-1. That's a totally different paradigm of how you might administer a GLP-1 than injecting yourself once a week, getting to super high levels, keeping those levels really high. They drop off and then you got to inject yourself again. That's how the drugs work. What if your body could just manufacture more human GLP-1 where you need it, when you need it, and use its own regulatory system to figure out how much you need? That's what we're developing. We're calling it a smart GLP-1. We're testing it. We've tested it extensively against Wegovy and semaglutide in preclinical models in both diabetes and in preclinical models of obesity, where it has shown remarkable potency, works really well. It's a one-time treatment that seems to last really long. And we're confident that this is a therapy that has the potential to be really well tolerated because you're mimicking human physiology of GLP-1 rather than a pharmacological strategy. And
Amazing.
that's going to have clinical data next year. But what's really cool about that, it has a potential to be curative for
Yeah.
type 2 diabetes and obesity.
Really
And so
amazing.
that's really, really where we think the field is heading. And we're really focused on trying to unlock the next frontier in obesity therapies, like trying to offer patients things that chronic pharmacology can't do. And that's the tie that binds both what Revita is doing with the duodenal ablation procedure and what Rejuva is doing with the gene therapy.
Potential for them to maybe work synergistically in any way, do you think?
I don't know how much your listeners know about a Roux-en-Y gastric bypass surgery, but a Roux-en-Y gastric bypass has effects on the duodenum, and it also has effects on GLP-1 signaling, and they're separate mechanisms. They seem to be synergistic. And so wouldn't it be cool to run a study where you're looking at potential synergy of Revita and Rejuva for even greater efficacy than either one could achieve on their own? So that's down the line, obviously, but yeah, potentially.
The future is bright. Harith, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you got a jet. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit more about what's going on there. Hopefully, as more data drops, you can come back and share it with us. Anything else you'd like to add before we jump off?
No, I just think that I appreciate the opportunity to continue to chat with you, Dave. And I think that you bring a really valuable perspective on the patient's view of these diseases and conditions. And I'm just going to leave you with a thought that my goal is to force you to change the name of your podcast from On the Pen to Off the Pen.
I love it. I love it. Maybe one day. I tell you what, if I get the procedure and I can ditch the medicines, you got a deal.
Let's talk offline.
Sounds good. Thanks,
Okay,
Harith.
okay.
Dr. Harith Rajagopalan, CEO of Fractal Health, they are working on such amazing stuff there. We thank them for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed that interview. If you've got any questions for Harith or for Fractal, go ahead and drop them in the comments here or drop them at dave@onthepen.com.